Trump predictably put out a statement last night calling the Georgia case election interference. Willis has given Trump and his co-defendants until noon on Friday, August 25th to voluntarily surrender. Joining me now to talk more about this, Jeremy Saland is with us, a New York criminal attorney, former Manhattan prosecutor. Jeremy, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Matt.
As you heard the details of this last night and went through the counts in this indictment, what was your perspective on it?
You know, I would say it's shocking and it was concerning, but that's something that we've been hearing time and time again. There was interference and it was led by Donald Trump, but now we hear and learn specifically in an indictment that it's beyond Donald Trump. So we knew it in terms of the allegations and other indictments. There's unindicted co-conspirators, but here we see the actual players who are accused of being involved.
Explain to me what the significance of these RICO laws and of this phrase about a criminal enterprise is, widely used to break up mafia organizations in the past. What exactly is a criminal enterprise?
Well, it's worth noting that there's the federal RICO statute, and then the states have their own. New York has something called enterprise corruption. So what they're alleging is that there was an organization, and this organization doesn't have to be a formal one that, you know, files with the state, but it was a crew or bigger of people who shared a common goal, a criminal goal and a criminal objective, and they furthered that goal, in this case, to try to overturn the election. And it's a statement that it's a strong case, because to get to that level for a prosecutor, you have to have, we'll call it the conspiracy or the elements and the actions to build this case, all the different players. So it really shows me that DA Willis out of Georgia, out of Atlanta, did her homework, and certainly a jury will confirm whether it's proven beyond a reasonable doubt, but to set forth all the different ways this crew or group pursued the ways to overturn the election.
This is Rudy Giuliani actually just before the indictment came out, but he was reacting to clearly what he knew was coming down the line.
It does trouble me greatly, because I value my reputation beyond anything. And I find that what they've done here is reprehensible. And I feel it's reprehensible with regard to me, my family, my career, and what I've done in my life.
I wanted to ask you about Rudy Giuliani. This is somebody who was known for going after criminal enterprises in his day as a prosecutor, and here this has come full circle now.
Yeah, I mean, he's crying wolf, but he's also alleged to be the actual wolf who's perpetrating the crime. And you know, listen, any defendant or most defendants are going to claim the same thing. I'm the victim here. And we can't forget the fact that there has to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt, but it is a little bit rich. And unfortunately, Giuliani, who was America's mayor, has really fallen from grace. But, you know, you sleep with certain people and that's what happens. Now, again, it doesn't mean he's guilty, but he's not in an enviable position, but it's a position of his own doing.
In your view, Jeremy, what happens next on this in terms of the Georgia case? Obviously, Trump will have to present himself at some point in the next week or so. Is it the legal maneuvering where he will try to stall the case?
He very well may, but the last thing he wants to see happen is this is not a federal case. He can't pardon himself the way out of this, even if he were to win an election. He does not want a Georgia judge issue a bench warrant for his arrest. He'll surrender because, in part, that's what he wants to do. He wants to put on the show. But I expect somewhat similar to the federal cases, you're going to have discovery time, and you have multiple defendants, so there may be a voluminous amount of discovery that's going to be put forth. And it's a lot of getting this together and getting everyone coordinated. But you're going to see some wrangling inside and outside of the courtroom, motion practice to delay this. This statute, keep in mind, and the indictment doesn't just deal with Georgia. It talks about other states, Pennsylvania, Nevada. So there's going to be a lot of that type of work of discovery and disclosing information and fighting this legally to stop it from going forward from Trump's team.
Former prosecutor and New York criminal attorney Jeremy Saland, appreciate your insight this morning.
Thank you.
And as we continue our coverage of all of this, we are now joined by Jeremy Saland, a criminal attorney here in New York and a former Manhattan prosecutor. Jeremy, good to see you as always. Why don't we bring up the charges again? We have gone through all of these indictments now with you. Just how damaging could these charges be if he is found guilty?
But you have to start from the top, which is what we call that RICO statute. In New York, the version of that is enterprise corruption. But I understand in Georgia, it's a minimum of 5 years if he's convicted and can be as great as 20 years. It's called a serious felony, which is on par with some of the most violent crimes like a kidnapping or even a rape. So the offense that he is facing is extremely serious. And all those other charges are certainly very serious as well. But the overarching one is absolutely that RICO charge.
Let's talk a little bit more, Jeremy, about that RICO statute that the DA used. Basically, in layman's terms, allowing you to take different crimes, link them together. But as we have pointed out, often used for mob cases. So why is the DA using it as a tool in this case? Do you think it's an effective strategy?
It's routinely done by prosecutors. It could be a construction fraud case in Manhattan. It could be a drug case in Brooklyn. And in this case, an election fraud type case in Georgia, in the land of Fulton County. I think it's effective if you want to get the entire narrative in. We've heard of the term speaking indictment. This is really greater than that. You take all these overt acts and you build this case that may not directly implicate the person or people charged in every single overt act, but you get the overarching, the entirety of all the misconduct wherever it occurs, both inside your county of jurisdiction and elsewhere. So it's very effective, but it doesn't mean it doesn't have its own issues as well.
There are so many players in this indictment, multiple indictments. Is this a situation where you think part of the strategy is hoping that maybe some of those more minor players who perhaps former President Trump doesn't know personally, kind of setting some of those smaller players up to cooperate perhaps with the DA?
No doubt. Some of these lessers, if you want to call them that, are going to flip, if that's another term people use, to cooperate against Donald Trump because their exposure, even a year in jail in their careers, is way too much to handle. So I think that's a very safe assumption that very well might happen.
What do you think about the timing of all of this? The DA has said that she wants to get this trial on the calendar, but Trump also has a packed legal calendar ahead of him himself. Of course, he is running for re-election. So where do you think they go with something like this?
Setting that all aside, even in the best case scenario, that 6-month timeline is just not realistic. You have so many defendants. You're going to have motions to sever in all likelihood, motions to dismiss for legal sufficiency, a lot of discovery. There's so many moving parts. That's why I think Jack Smith in that federal indictment really kept it to Donald Trump and had them as co-conspirators unnamed, as opposed to some of these people actually in the indictment here in Georgia, because that just really blows out your timetable and makes it that much more convoluted to push forward. And just think about jury selection, how long that can take to impanel a jury for this matter of such import with that many defendants.
We have heard so much about
6-month timeline. I don't think it's very realistic.
Yeah, that seems to be the general consensus, is that they could try, but there's going to be all these other loops to go through in order to get to that trial. Let's talk about there has been a lot of talk about perhaps, these are state charges. So if Trump indeed is reelected, he could not pardon himself. Talk to us a little bit about that, what you think people should understand about the difference between some of the federal and state charges he's facing.
They're each sovereign. In other words, the state is a state, just like New York is different from Georgia. It's also different from the federal government. A governor can pardon in a state case. So the governor of Georgia, whoever that will be at the time, if it's still Kemp, he can pardon, in theory, the president. But the president, even assuming he has that ability to pardon himself in a federal matter, lacks that authority in a state matter. There are two totally separate branches, if you will, two totally separate entities, and he cannot use that power to pardon anybody on the state level.
Jeremy, always good to talk to you. You always make it easy to understand. Thank you so much for being with us. And we are going to have much more on this and so much else that we are covering today after the break. Stay with us. News All Day. We'll be right back.